Well, in an earlier tutorial, we did a quick camera follow on Bolt, with Bolt visual scripting, and just set up a script for the camera to follow. And in that tutorial, I said there's an easier way to do it. So let's look at that easier way to do it. So first thing I'm going to do is come over here and remove the script we linked to the camera. So just click on that box and hit delete. Is a quick way to get that out of there. So now when we run the game, our camera is not following the character anymore. You can go right off the screen. So just detach that script from the camera. So another thing we can do that's much easier to use is Unity has a lot of features, if you couldn't tell from the interface here, and not just these features. There are a lot of features that are not turned on by default. So we can go turn other things on. So if we go to Window, then Package Manager, we'll get this little pop-up come up and show us all the packages that we're currently using in our project. And right up here, you'll see a button that says All Packages. If we click on that and select All Packages, it'll load in everything that Unity has available. So you can see there's a lot more here than just what's available by default. And we don't necessarily have to go download everything from the asset store. So what I wanted to look at is right down here under C, everything's nicely and put in alphabetical order. We have this package called Cinemachine. And this is a whole lot of pre-built camera options that make it super easy to use. So all we have to do is go to Window, Packages, go to All Packages, select Cinemachine, and then Install. And now a bunch of waiting while that installs. I'll pause the video while it installs. And it doesn't take long to install, just a minute or two, but I figured that there was no need to have the video watch all that. But after it installs, we should get a message here that says it's up to date, and then the available option is to remove it. So we can close the package manager, and you'll notice up here in the main menu, we have a new button, a button for Cinemachine. So if we go in here, we're in a 2D game, so we can create a 2D camera. And it added a new camera here in the hierarchy. And this is a virtual camera. Notice VCam, since it's a virtual camera, and it is linked directly to our main camera. So if we go up main camera, you can look at the transform position here. And on the VM camera, notice that the transform is in the same position, same rotation and all that if yours is changed. So it is linked directly to our camera. And setting it up, if we scroll through the options in the inspector here, the little words keep popping up getting in the way. You'll notice one of the options is follow. And we get that hint, the object that the camera wants to move with. So we can just select our player, drag that right over here and drop it in the follow box. And now it is ready to follow our player. So I'll run this, and that's all it takes. And there's a couple options we will look at here in just a second after this runs. And so here it is running, and the first thing you're obviously going to notice is these big blue guidelines and this little area marks it put on here. That is just this checkbox. So we can uncheck that box after we do all the settings. But you'll notice when I move around now, the camera already follows. So that's all it takes to get the camera following the character. But notice how those guidelines point right to the center, and it moves exactly with it. There are ways we can make the camera look a little bit better, kind of smooth that out, and some other options. So let's look at some of the other options here. Well, there are quite a few options, but the ones I wanted to point out, you can kind of play around with those, make some changes, see what happens. The ones I wanted to point out are down here in this section called body. So if it's not expanded, go ahead and expand that. And the first one that I always like to adjust is this dead zone option. That just gives us a little bit of wiggle room. It sets up a little bit of space in the middle of the screen where the player can move without the camera moving. I'll set that, just kind of drag that over, choose some random numbers, and run this again. So now you'll immediately notice those guidelines have adjusted, and there's this hole in the middle of the screen basically. And that's area our player can move without the camera following. So some wiggle room in the middle of the screen. And then once we pass that, then the camera follows. And for the next option I want to look at, well, I'll point at it right now that the way it kind of slows down and goes smoothly, that's your damping object option here. So you can just drag this slider around and find a smoothing value you like for that. And notice this little yellow dot on the player. That'll be important for the other option I want to look at. Another useful option is if we can move around in the middle of the screen before the camera follows, well, if our character starts running or moving really fast, we're not going to have as much room to see what's coming. And that's this option here, look ahead time. So we can just bring this up a little, and it's like a little bit of a preview. And so when we run this now, you'll notice when I move, that little yellow dot moves ahead, kind of giving a preview of what's coming. I better get that speech bubble out of the way. Type in the answer there. And we can adjust that here and look much further ahead. So you can see it that way. If our character starts moving quickly, we get a little bit of a preview of what's coming up ahead. So that can be a very useful feature if you want to include that wiggle room in the middle of the screen. And you can just play around with these scenes. Again, damping is how smoothly it follows, is the short way of saying that. Some other options, the best way to learn is just play around, make changes, and see what happens. And then once you're happy with it, just come up here and uncheck this box for those guidelines in the window. So we run this now. You'll see those guidelines are gone, and we end up with a much smoother camera follow action. My key is sticking, which I think comes from the screen recorder. But you'll see we get a much smoother camera follow this way. Except that my keys are sticking and not wanting to work correctly. But that is a much easier way to do that than that script that we started out with. So just go to Window and Package Manager and look at all packages available and install Cinemachine. Then just choose Create 2D Camera. It will automatically link to your main camera, and then just set up those options for which object to follow, and then any of these smoothing or previewing options that you might want to use. And it just provides a much easier way to get a nice camera follow action going.